was a Saturday morning, and my friends Sean, Jason, and I planned on ingesting some mushrooms. We woke up around 1 that afternoon to get some food in our stomachs before we had any of the substance. After eating some food at a local Five Guys, we walked back up to our dorm to start the procedures. 3 p.m. My friends and I each eat our share of mushrooms. My friends Sean and Jason ate about 1.7 grams each to themselves, while I made a peanut butter sandwich containing 1/8 of mushrooms. After about half an hour on mushrooms, I began to get extremely lightheaded sitting inside and told my friends I needed to get some fresh air while they rolled the joints. I went outside and immediately felt a little better. However, the feeling I was experiencing was extreme lightheadedness and a very strong body high, as if I had smoked a bunch of cigarettes. 3:45. My friends meet me outside and smoke a joint of marijuana on the way down campus to get to a local park, our goal for the day. The walk to the field took about 45 minutes, but on the way, things began to change and images began to form. The city I lived in took the appearance of a vast, swelling multitude of people, strange-looking vehicles, and awe-striking buildings. Now I walk through this city every day to get to class, but at this point, walking through the city, I felt as if I were walking through it for the first time ever. The buildings were beautiful and the sky was amazing. Tree branches and such swirled into extravagant works of the Earth's art, and cars looked like futuristic vehicles from space. I became lost several times in this new world that I had just been birthed into. 4:30. My friends and I reached our destination, walking up a gigantic hill toward the top of the park. The entire time we were listening to music on my phone, which generated a very relaxed feeling and made the situation very enjoyable. We reached the top of the hill where we could see the entire city in a sprawling, beautiful mess of metropolitan skyscrapers that now look like floating castles or paintings upon the portrait of the sky. I looked at my friends who were all speaking in almost another language. We kept having to tell ourselves where we were, what day it was, and who we were, because the environment was so rapidly changing. The city was not the city anymore. We were in a beautiful, sprawling environment that had never existed before today. Everything was new. We sat up on this hill for quite a long time, blabbering about nothing but just enjoying this incredible feeling of freedom when my friend Eugene came up the hill. I felt ecstatic seeing someone that was not on shrooms and could successfully keep us grounded on Earth. However, this would not be the case. 5:45. After about an hour of being up in the park, we decided to move about the city and look at other things. I had to follow my friends the entire journey, for I had no idea what was what anymore. The buildings all around me that I had come to know so well in my first year of college had changed, but looked utterly marvelous. We decided to enter a building that was having an art exhibit. This is where my paranoia began. Going into this building with the art exhibit, I could not help the feeling that someone was watching us or we were doing something wrong. I did not know how to act in regular society anymore. I wasn't entirely sure what I could and could not do, or how loud I was talking, or anything. My friends and I discussed for hours what we wanted to do, but we never knew what we wanted to do. I would randomly catch my friends walking around to another place or leaving, and became severely lost more than once at the exhibit. It was around this time that I felt afraid, a slight paranoia that my friends were plotting against me, that they weren't really my friends. I felt as if they were walking together, but I would be alone, looking around, lost in transition. I felt alone. 6:30. It was around this point that we began to walk back to our dorm. The The three of them walked far ahead of me as I waded along in the back, looking at the wondrous environment all around me. As we were walking back, I departed from the group and began walking into one of the buildings on my campus, without looking nor even caring whether my friends saw. It's a sprawling building of about 28 stories and a myriad of hallways, classrooms, and staircases. This is where I would literally encounter hell. 6:45. Upon entering the building, I began wandering its halls and attempting to grasp reality, but it was around this time that things began to change the most. I was convinced people were trying to get me in this building, and I was literally beginning a spiral into insanity. I remember walking into the bathroom at the building and sitting down to try and grasp things. It was at this point I heard someone else in the bathroom talking and saying, "Who else is in here? Where are your friends? I know he's here." It was at this point I heard a struggle and what sounded like someone being suffocated. I was utterly terrified sitting in this bathroom stall and called out but heard no return. At this point, I opened the door and walked out of the bathroom but didn't see anyone else in the bathroom. I walked down the steps and began to see the same things over and over and over again. I saw signs upon signs about Japan, and I was seeing Japanese people everywhere around the building. I even had a revelation that I was Japanese and all my friends were somehow of Japanese descent. I also remember seeing a man several times dressed all in black with a book and snickering at me. I thought he was there to harm me or something, for at least twice he would walk threateningly toward me, but at the last minute walk by with a manic smile on his face. It was also around this time my visualizations and view of reality was completely lost. 7:30 to 10 o'clock. This period remains a blur. I recall I attempted several times to leave this building, but I couldn't. Things started getting weird. I remember when I saw 3 families of people with very small children. I remember the parents were shielding their children from looking at me, and I looked at myself all these times trying to find what was making me look so strange. I was so confused. It started with the families, but then I began to notice there were many people looking, pointing, and whispering to each other about me. It was at this point I left the building and attempted to get on a bus back to my dorm, but the bus was filled with people talking nonsense. I recall getting on an extremely crowded bus with people yelling and talking. On my right was a male with a 24-pack of beer, something you don't naturally see on a school bus. Behind him were 2 girls talking about having an absurd amount of shots, something like 25 or so. I felt as if everyone was also staring at me, and I was somehow different. I remember looking at the girl next to me and seeing her messages also about drinking an absurd amount of alcohol, and she was somehow repulsed by me. After dealing with all this and waiting for the bus to move for about 10 minutes, I got off the bus and went back inside the building I had been in before. Upon entering the building, I remember looking around and seeing completely unnatural things. People who were working and studying were moving at insanely rapid rates of speed, tapping their feet very quickly and making horrible, inhumane twitching motions. People were glaring and looking at me strangely, and there were a great many incredibly ugly people who were somehow handicapped. I began to hear voices and sounds all over the building of flushing toilets, pipes chattering, and voices all saying things like, "Oh, he used to be so bright," "Shame," "Terrible story about him," "Went missing," "Yes, he's crazy now," "A grim story." I became totally sure I had entered another realm. I had entered insanity. I was literally crazy. I remember walking around the building now completely out of it. I was jabbering every word that came into my thoughts, While everyone around me was whispering and pointing at me, I completely thought I had gone mad, and I was in hell. I fully believed I was trapped in this building and that I would be here forever. I remember sitting in a stairwell of the building feeling terrible when a group of Japanese people walked by me looking horribly startled. They said things such as, "Are you okay? Can you stand? What on earth happened to you?" I tried to tell them I was fine, and I could not figure out what it was about me that was so strange. I began to think that I literally had overdosed on another drug, and this was death. I was going through the end stages. I had gone to insanity. I was crazy. I remember walking around this huge building with about 40 people in it and yelling for my friends, my dad, my mom, my family. I was having a mental breakdown. It was around this point that I sat on a table in the room and laid down on it. I laid there for about 20 minutes thinking this was it. I was just going to waste away here. I took off my shoes, my shirt, almost took off my pants so I was stark naked, but something resisted that, and I began walking up the stairs to the second floor. On the way up, I dumped my wallet in the stairs, along with all my money. I smashed my lighter and threw my cigarettes. I sat upon a ledge and just looked over. I had planned to jump to the chandelier in the middle of the room, but something held me back, I remember. At one point, I even went on a running start to jump, but I stopped. I don't know why. A man came below me and began to talk to me while I was sitting on the ledge. I was utterly positive that whatever I thought, he would say, that I was controlling what he would speak. He called the police, and they ended up coming up the stairs and subduing me. I recall looking behind me at a girl taking a picture, then turning back to look down at the man below me and believing I was also that girl taking the picture. I remember as I turned away from her, I saw myself with a camera in my hand as well, although it was not really there. Anyway, when the cops subdued me, I was sure I could control them and what they spoke of as well. Although I didn't physically fight back with the police, I was not at all cooperative and moving, and I ended up being thrown down a stairwell with which I got a pretty nice bruise on my shoulder. I believed I was also controlling the police, and it was extremely strange. They picked me up, and I remember thinking to myself for them to stop, and they literally did right there on the steps. It was at this point I fell down the steps because they let go of me. I also remember thinking of the words they were asking, which were marijuana, shrooms, or what the hell were you doing, to which they all spoke. I believed I was controlling everything. Even in the ride in the police cruiser, I put my head down and imagined the car going faster and faster, and it would. I also imagined seeing the same cars over and over again. They brought me to the hospital where they tried to sit me down in a wheelchair, but I insisted on walking. Well, they shoved me down into the seat, and I remember thinking I had control of where the wheelchair was going as well. They took me into a room where I was restrained on a gurney and hooked up to an IV. I looked around at all the people in the room and believed they were all fusions of my family. I saw my brother in one doctor, my sister in another, and me and the doctor overseeing me the most. I even noted his sense of humor as similar to mine. During this whole ordeal, I literally called my doctors by my family's names. I was in extreme panic and terror at this point, fully believing this insanity would last forever and I would never leave. It was at this point the doctor came in with my mom on the phone. I remembered hearing my mom's voice and completely feeling a sense of shock because I had anticipated no one to be on the line. I remembered trying to think of what she would say as if I were still in control, but surprisingly, she said different things. I told her I was really afraid of what was happening, and I asked her what to do, and she told me to just sleep and let the doctors take care of me. I then asked if Dad was there too, which I didn't think he would be, but to my astonishment he was there as well, and he told me reassuring things and to calm down as well. I started crying really hard at this point and telling them I loved them so much because I literally just wanted to come back to sanity, come back to my family, come back to life. I remember during this whole ordeal the doctors were laughing at me and I thought it was still a dream. I tried to sleep and thought of it as my only gateway back to real life. However, over the next couple hours at the hospital, and due to my inability to sleep, I slowly came to the horrible realization that everything that had happened had really happened. I was so sure all the things I saw and heard that day could never happen in real life. I was so disturbed from everything that day that I completely believed it had all been a dream. It hadn't been a dream, though. Now, this all happened yesterday, so I'm still waiting to hear of the consequences, but no doubt it was the most extreme, haunting, and terrifying experience of my entire life.